part of your life, because when you do develop your higher sensory connection and these higher communications, the fear is really eradicated because it becomes very clear to you. If you're still really motivated externally by the chaos, then it's going to be like being batted around by forces you don't understand. Because again, the frequency and the energy is just getting more and more amplified now. So right now is the time really to develop the inner strength and connection and really feeling the intuitive faculties of our higher senses rather than relying on the external, because we're at a point now where it's shifting, it's just going to get more intense externally. So again, the Indigo ones are working with anchoring large amounts of frequency, certain places on the planet to stabilize it. So we're seeing all over the globe, people are being drawn to create these sustainable or off-the-grid communities. And a lot of that is, of course, on the outward appearance for the quality of life that many of us feel we don't have anymore in the metropolis. But also it's serving a higher purpose as well, as getting like-minded groups together that hold higher levels of frequency to be anchored all in one place on the planet. If you get a couple hundred people anchored in a particular area, that's very powerful. And generally what will happen is that's no accident. Those people are being brought together because they hold a very similar frequency, and that frequency is needed at that particular level of the grid structure on the planet. So these are Indigo type 1s. The more advanced ones in terms of an awareness spiritually are the ones that work more with grid structure. This level is called to work with vortices on the planet. The planet has ley lines, meridians, excitonal points that are key, very much like the human body. And these points at times, when you are in service at this level, the spiritual hierarchy or your own guidance will come forward and you will work with repairing these grids, bringing energy to these grids. A lot of light workers are actually aware of that particular level of work. And again, this is the Indigo 1 type of spectrum. So again, if you feel called at those particular levels, it might be interesting to feel that that is a part of your larger purpose and why it may be becoming more intense in your life at this time. Because of the deployment, you'll find that your soul purpose will get more and more amplified, and you'll be forced to focus on this particular area. So the Indigo 2s are more of the genetic path cutters and the healers, the teachers. The Indigo 2s are here specifically for genetic rehabilitation. So as the Indigo 1s work more on a larger planet scale, working with the environment or working with energy grids, the Indigo 2s may be more of the teacher, etheric surgeons. They work more at the healing level to assist beings that come into their healing practice or whatever they happen to be doing to actually transmit codes that help strengthen the human DNA. So a lot of us that may have had Reiki or particular modalities where we were transmitting energy, this was actually much more than that. It's purposed as an exchange, and as we start to grow our consciousness, we also start to transmit codes of higher evolution to the beings around us. So I think the spiritual hierarchy at this point is hoping that we become more interactive with our processes so that we again can call upon the power of not only our multidimensional God self, but call upon the power of our star lineage and our group soul races. Because in all honesty, I know that that's the only reason why I'm standing here. I'm highly a proponent of connecting to your star family lineage because of the support and the resources that are that you feel supported at that level. Because sometimes when you go into this path, it can feel rather isolating and alone, because we're again the path cutters and we're the first group and wave that are going through this, laying the groundwork for the rest of humanity. So the Indigo 2s tend to be more teachers, healers at that particular level, working with genetic rehabilitation. The Indigo 3, the last one they discussed, is about polarity integration. And the Indigo 3s, we really must have an incredible amount of love and support for these beings because, again, we all have what we need and it's perfect. But it's a rather challenging soul path in that the Indigo 3s are sharing body with more than one soul essence. And so we're seeing this phenomena with a lot of the Indigo children that are kind of fractious and have behavioral or learning disorders or autism or ADD and this kind of thing. In the more advanced cases, where it makes it very hard for them to function into third dimensional society, a lot of them are Indigo 3s. And the point of this is to embody a polarity integration template. And that has to do with all the rehabilitation work we're doing with the races that have been seeking to control the human species at this level. A lot of them are going to need to be rehabilitated too. And so the feeling is, or kind of the sentiment, is that many of the races and parts of the human that have de-evolved into aggression in the frontal lobe and not developing the higher levels of the intelligence and consciousness have been genetically digressed to such level that there's a big healing that needs to take place to literally unify, let's say, a lower formed essence of consciousness with a higher evolved form of consciousness. So they're bringing, let's say, an Anunnaki particular level of consciousness, which may be very aggressive and war-driven, with something that is very Christ-like in terms of, if we use that archetype, something that's more at peace and in the oneness. So what happens in these particular individuals is they feel very polarized. They're in conflict with themselves, and a lot of the bipolar and other things kind of manifest out of that. And so it's an amazing service that these souls are providing by actually embodying that level of consciousness, because they're creating these templates that are going to be used for future races and for other time-space. But it doesn't seem like it would be the easiest path to take, but there's a lot of beings that are actually choosing that as well. So that is the Indigo 3s. And again, I think I kind of went through the Earth Seed and Star Seed races, and that's really, looking at third dimensional consciousness. Another way to say what Indigo and Star Seeds are is that we were not, the Indigo races were not a part of the original seeding experiments of this planet Earth. So the Earth Seeds, many of them have been here for a very long period of time, just going through the cycles over and over again. The Star Seeds came again from the higher dimensional levels, and again, not of value, just another way to express dimension, but from other planetary systems where suffering, separation, and the veils of illusion and density that exist here don't exist in the higher dimensional levels of consciousness. So to come here was actually quite a shock for many of us. We became masters of the illusion, masters of deception, because the human ego is all about deception. The whole hologram is about looking at what is not real. And so the problem is that human consciousness has totally become lost in the hologram, and the controllers of the hologram know this. Now, for us to be able to control the hologram again, we have to understand our multidimensional consciousness and be able to direct our consciousness in such a way we are now focused on our soul purpose. When we start to do that, we change the agreements of the human collective. Because at this particular time-space, what happened is we had agreements of polarity and duality as well, and then fell totally asleep to the way this hologram is presented to us as the external reality, and became trapped in here for a long period of time. So again, that's another function or purpose of the Indigo races, is to learn how to work with the hologram. And as we learn to work with the hologram, we learn how to control it, and we can change the agreement for the human race. And then again, move into higher reality systems, which are again freed of the suffering and the spiritual blindness that has kind of been perpetrated in this particular reality system. So the only other point I wanted to make that's also in the book is just that when working with any Indigo children, I provided some techniques in here. If you, again, it's very important if you work with any children that are Indigo, that are having any kind of biological, physical, or neurological problems as we move into these higher frequency states, that you ask for their permission, on a higher self level, before you actually institute any kind of technique. But I've provided that technique for adult Indigos as a frequency calibration, as well as Indigo children. So I just wanted to point that out, that it can be applied in both. and that many times when you've developed enough of your higher sensory perception and intuition, you can feel when it's in alignment or when it's not. And when there is an opening, this is especially helpful for indigos that may be autistic or having, some of the issues that I talked at are Indigo 3 type of spectrum. This calibration and use of what I call the 12-dimensional seal is really powerful for them. It will really help them be more comfortable in their physical bodies. Because what's happening now, of course, is we're getting incredible amounts of frequency. The frequency, when it doesn't have the etheric natus, this electrical component to be able to conduct it, it's almost like feeling like you're shorting out. The biology is having to transition very fast. We're evolving very fast. When you think about the human race in evolution cycles for hundreds of thousands of years have been involved in the first 3 chakras, we're going from the 3rd chakra to the way beyond in really only 20 years. That's an incredible leap for our biologies, which can handle it, but still, it's at times we have a little transitional stress. So that's what that's designed to do, is to help the bodies calibrate more easily. And again, the other point I wanted to just make is that the indigo neurology, in my experience, is different. So those of you that may or may not know me in sessions, is I facilitate etheric surgery. And what I have found in looking at the body etherically is that star race beings, indigo beings, have a different neurological structure in the etheric natus than a 3rd-dimensional human. And this tends to create a different level of sensory perception and cognition that most of the 3rd-dimensional beings do not have. So sometimes it's good to kind of do that inquiry of awareness, because I think in the beginning stages, it's very challenging. Let's say as a youngster, when you look around at the human race, you just go, well, you've got 2 eyes, 2 arms, why aren't you feeling what I'm feeling? But what I've actually seen is that literally the capacity to feel and sense is not there yet. It's possible, but it's dormant still. So many of the starseed races and indigo beings have multidimensional awareness of consciousness, and that means higher sensory perception and intuitive faculties that most of the human race does not have. So that gives you a completely different view of an awareness that sometimes can be very confusing when you're standing next to a 3D being and you're saying, do you see that? And they say no. And you see something very clearly. It can be kind of confusing to you. And so that's, again, another figment of understanding that each one of us is our own universe. And at that level, we will see and be created in terms of the level of consciousness, what the perception is. And as you come into higher light bodies, all I can say is from my own experience, I think everyone is different, but I have something of energy receivers that has allowed me to see untold life forms existing multidimensionally. But I know that most of the human race at this time is not able to see all of these races. So it's really just a matter of time in terms of when that is going to occur in terms of human consciousness. Because as we move into the higher realms, we're going to start to see more and more of the invisible becoming visible in this realm. The question just becomes, I guess, when? At what level is that going to happen? But the star and the indigo beings have different neurological plexus. It's very clear. And what the guardian races has said to me is that this is really like taking the human race 100 years in the future. The human race is meant to actually evolve into these higher states of consciousness and have these neurological plug-ins, but they're still, again, working on that as a process of evolution, which comes through DNA activation, by the way. So, let's see. So yes, so the calibration is at the end. And the other thing I just wanted to discuss briefly is that those of us that have moved into planetary ascension, which is 7 levels using the chakra column. I'm feeling most of you in this room are still working on your 6th and 7th levels. So in working at this level, again, once we actually start to integrate the 6th and 7th dimensional energies, just so you know, in case anyone in this room is starting to have pain in this way, it's in the body here. So on the right-hand side of the masculine is the manifestation template, the core of our body, where we start to bring in 6-dimensional frequency comes here, and it gets synthesized